And next thing we know, we're just going airborne, all braced ourselves. I mean, it was too hard to react. We nosedive into a bomb crater. My name is Armando Garcia Jr. I served in the military for 30 years, 2 branches, United States Air Force, 81 to 85, and then the Marine Corps thereafter till 2011. I got out of the Marine Corps as a Chief Warrant Officer 4. I was born in a town in Texas called Del Rio, which falls along the border on the southwest portion of Texas. I was born there in 1962, born and raised there my whole life until I joined the military. My upbringing was good. You know, I had 2 parents, they stayed together, and I had 2 sisters and 1 brother. Pretty much the bonding was there as far as family. We had good moral values growing up in a Christian home. So I can say that my upbringing was real good. Learning how to do without, but still enjoying the family life, good neighborhood. Talking a neighborhood, unlike you see here. You know, I grew up where the streets weren't paved, there were no sidewalks, we walked to school. Other people would say that's deprived or poverty, but what I saw was it was enriched with a lot of family traditions and joy. So I really had a good upbringing. It was in 1980, 81. I was working as a truck driver for General Beverages, selling soda, so to speak. And then my wife then got pregnant, and obviously at that income, there was no way I could afford that. That was my first trigger that I decided to join the military. Even though way before, when I was in grade school, there was a calling for me, but I just didn't know exactly what it was, but I knew it was going towards the military. Not my first choice. The recruiter, running into him, the Air Force recruiter, I was convinced to join the Air Force, which I did honorably. I did 4 years, and my experience with my first recruiter, which was the U.S. Air Force recruiter, I had just gotten off of work. I said, I got to make a decision. So I went to the Air Force recruiter's office right after work. I was actually going to the Marine recruiter. So let me back up. I was actually going to the Marine recruiter. When I knocked on his door, there was no answer. And that's when the gentleman behind me came. And I turned around, and it happened to be the Air Force recruiter. He wanted to know why I was there. And I said, well, I'm thinking of joining the Marines, and I'm looking for the Marine recruiter. He said, well, why do you want to join the Marines? And I kind of said, well, my wife is pregnant. I can't afford it. And I know the military can cover that. And my heart's always been set to join the Marines. Oh, really? He said, well, come to my office and tell me more about it. And next thing you know, I'm sitting down, we're talking about it. Then he invites my wife, and he brings his wife along. Then we invites us to dinner, and pretty much that sold the ticket to my wife. And of course, her being my wife at the time convinced me, and with a baby on the way, and put in the scare tactic that I was always going to be deployed, being reinforced with those comments from his wife, which I thought was a good decision at the time, and with no regrets to this day. But that was my experience with the Air Force recruiter, and I enlisted. The job that I got in the Air Force, or that was assigned to me, was a security policeman. There was two sections of it. One was law enforcement, and one's with security forces, basically the ones that guard missiles, aircraft, and then the law enforcement doing just like a city cop does here. Chose the law enforcement, even though I ended up doing both jobs once I was assigned to my first duty station. My first assignment was in New Mexico at a base called Cannon Air Force Base. They had fighter jets there. About a year and a half later, and I think that was a highlight of my career, was when I got orders to Korea. I was assigned to a place I had never even heard of, as Suwon Air Base, which was actually a small Korean base with a small U.S. Air Force detachment. And I can tell you, having never traveled outside the States other than Mexico, going to Korea, to a foreign country, I think that was one of my highlights in my Air Force career, where not only did I learn a different culture, different experiences, but it just kind of broadened my shy away from different people, cultures, or what have you. I mean, it was an experience itself, so it was a good experience. I mean, it had its ups and downs. I knew at the tail end, it was an unaccompanied tour, so I was there for a whole year by myself, and then without meaning, not bringing my family. And then after that, I went ahead and got reassigned to a base of my choice, which was a good thing. And I selected to go back to Texas because I knew I was going to get out, and I wanted to be close to home, which was Time Brooks Air Force Base. By this time, we were looking at, 1983, later part of the year. I finished my time there, and I got out. So after my honorable discharge from the Air Force, I was already banging on the Marine Corps recruiter's door, which, again, that was my initial plan to begin with. He said, I cannot touch it till you get discharged from the Air Force. I said, okay, very well, and I sticking to my plan. As soon as I got discharged, which was sometime in, I want to say in May 1985, I went straight to the recruiter the following week, and next thing you know, I'm enlisting into the Marine Corps, going through the whole process again, going through MESEP, taking the ASVAB, and all that other stuff. I had to go through that process again. I'm being shipped off to MCRD San Diego late in May. So when I got to boot camp, obviously I already went, Marine Corps boot camp, I already went with the MOS, assigned MOS. So not knowing the breakdown, the dynamics of the Marine Corps and how they worked, other than it was another military branch, the recruiter, based on my ASVAB scores, offered me these jobs, and he said, look, I think this would be good for you. Construction draftsman. There was other ones, but I ended up with being assigned as a construction draftsman going into boot camp. My experiences in boot camp, Marine Corps boot camp, in comparison to the Air Force, not to take anything away from the Air Force, but it was night and day. Obviously, at least I had something to bring, meaning I was familiar that it was a military. I had been in the military. There was a lot of diversity, meaning different people from all walks of life. I had that understanding, there was some rules and regulations to follow, uniform you had to throw on, but it was at a high intensity level. Didn't catch me off guard, but I just kind of knew that it was going to be that. It was very demanding. Anybody that's been down there, either as a recruit or drill instructor, can tell you that it's always about time management, and it's always on the go, go, go. So it was a rude awakening, so to speak, but it was very rewarding for me, because I felt this is where I should have been from day one. Again, nothing against from the Air Force. I did that. I did it honorably. I finally found my right click here with the Marine Corps. His name was Sergeant Perrick. He was definitely one that really I looked up to, and I, just like most of us in that platoon, which was platoon 1057. One of the experiences, he was always very demanding, and when he saw, and we were going through inspections, him and I had a conversation. He saw that I had my good conduct from the Air Force. He had taken me to the PX to go buy it. He kind of gave me a motivational speech. It was something not as you would from a father to son, but it was very firm. It was almost like an order that I would succeed and that I would move myself forward and that never to give up. And that's what he expected, and that's what the Marine Corps expected out of me. So that really stuck out with me. I'm not talking so much, as any recruit can tell you, we all got thrashed. We all got, and what is thrashed? That means you're basically doing a number of calisthenic exercises nonstop for a set time till you're worn out, and it kind of gets to you. So you're not only building yourself mentally stronger, but also physically stronger. And it has its purpose. That's what thrashing was. And believe me, it's even out in the active duty forces as well. So, after completing my 3 months there at boot camp, I had my orders. And unlike today, there was no MCT, Marine Corps combat training, which now they have, which I think is a good thing. With the motto of every Marine is a rifleman or person, I guess, today. They didn't have that yet. You got that infantry training in boot camp. That said, I had orders. I got orders Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which I spent, if memory serves me right, I think 3 months, basically how to draw blueprints, and I was meritoriously promoted out of there. And then from there, I got my first assignment to Camp Pendleton, the 7th Engineers Battalion. So my experiences with 7th Engineers Battalion, fast pace, opportunity was there. There were some good NCOs, and they definitely made sure that not only was I tasked to do assignments, but make sure they would always oversee that I was doing it correctly. And anybody that's drawn blueprints, and not, obviously we didn't have the equipment, the computer systems that they have now for drawing blueprints. Everything was with a stubby pencil and different leads. So everything had to always get reviewed and make sure everything was within code and in line. So, but it was good. I mean, I got assigned a lot of projects that I can proudly say that Some of those buildings that exist at Camp Pendleton were because of my drawings. One that comes to mind, there's in the 22 area side, and I remember I got the assignment. Corporal took me, got in the truck, and we went out there and said, we got to survey this site. We'll get the notes, and that was part of the process, get the survey, notes from the surveyor, and then you just kind of translate that to a blueprint. It's still there today. It's the dining facility in the 22 area that sits back on the right side, basically where the fire department is, behind the fire department. But that was my blueprint drawing, and I'm talking from ground up, everything from electrical, plumbing. Oh, I feel very proud. I think I left a footprint somewhere, somehow, but that's one of them. It makes me feel good. Makes me feel good, and I can tell you where I work at now, every once in a while, an opportunity presents that I can drive through Camp Pendleton, and those memories stick out to me. The hills, whether it's a building, raising flags or bringing the flags down during colors, you know, all that during taps. I mean, I had an impact, just like most of us Marines at whatever base they were stationed at. I had orders to Iwakuni, Japan. Again, another opportunity to go to the Far East, so I jumped at it. So I went, again, it was unaccompanied. There, it was an air wing unit, and obviously being with group, these are different entities within the military, and not to get into the details of that, but this was the air wing side, and over here I was with group, which is a supporting element. But anyway, I got up there, and I was Korea again, because to do blueprints for some airstrips and do some surveying. So I was able to go back to my stomping ground, so to speak, in Suwon Air Base when I was there. And just obviously, as a Marine this time, I got to go to the base and just kind of reminisce. That was one of my highlights that I did. Then after that, I went ahead and completed my tour and returned to the United States, to CONUS. Once I got back from Iwakuni, Japan, I was up for reenlistment. I was a corporal at the time. By this time, I was already a corporal. I wanted to do a lat move. Still felt something deep down inside of me missing. My marriage wasn't going so good at the time, and I just saw the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do something that I've always wanted to do back since 1981. I wanted to go into the infantry. And I remember walking to the career planner, and by this time I was assigned at temporarily with 4th Reconnaissance Battalion. And then I guess that's what really shed some light to me that, yep, I want to do this. I re-enlisted. I re-enlisted as an 0331, because the career planner said, okay, pick 3 MOSs. And me not knowing what each one of them specifically did, picked 0311, 0331, 0351, and I ended up with the 0331 MOS. And thereafter, sure enough, they cut me orders, and I was on my way back to Camp Pendleton. 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, Weapons Company. Making this move and getting my first orders after I left 4th Reconnaissance with a new MOS as an 0331, even though I had 4 years already under my belt as a Marine, going to Camp Pendleton to 1st Battalion, 1st Marines at Camp Horno, I didn't know what to expect when I got there. I expected with my MOS change, I was going to get some kind of formal training like most Marines do. They complete boot camp. Mine was going to be on-the-job training. When I got there, I didn't know what to expect. I knew that there's other Marines there that had been doing the 03 MOS longer than I had. So, and now I'm coming as an NCO, and as we know, NCOs are held to a high standard in the Marine Corps. So I knew I had to basically put my maximum effort as best as I can, but I'm not gonna BS anybody through and thinking what I might not know. I had to rely on other Marines, as we all do, as a team effort. But the good thing is the NCOs welcomed me. I told them straight out where I was coming from. I had made an MOS change, and the NCOs understood. Yeah, they picked on me, they ragged on me, of course. Even to this day, we do that to each other with each other branch. But I had a good welcoming, nothing like the traditional welcoming that a SOI 03 Marine comes into his first unit can expect. Obviously, maybe because they saw me as an NCO, I was a little bit older, but then again, I was embraced by those good NCOs, and I thanked them. I thank them for taking me under the wing, and they saw, hey, he's one of us, and meaning as an NCO. I said, we got to help him and, with his team, and they did. The way I took to my first assignment, when I got there to weapons company, I was expecting to go to a rifle company. Just me, my rifle, and my team. But honestly, when they gave me weapons company, and anybody that's in weapons company, it's not just your team and your weapons and your equipment. Now you got a vehicle. And I had a vehicle assigned to me. Now I have crew serve weapons, a 50 caliber and a Mattis and a Mark 19 assigned to me. So not only did I have to maintain those and make sure that we became proficient on them, my whole team, but at the same time, how to also conduct and do movements with the vehicle. So there's no foot mobile or foot patrols, everything. And then how to do combined patrols with foot teams on ground as 0311s and then with attachments. And very often we always got attachments or we got attached out or detached to a line company. So I had to learn all the fundamentals of that and how I can not only dissect it, but also understand it and then follow through. Because as a weapons company, you're considered a high profile capability for any line company because of just the firepower that you bring to the fight. One of the things that when I was there with weapons company, obviously we went and did a lot of training out in the fields. We were going to go to 29 Palms and do a CAX, what it was called then, a combined arms exercise. Word had gotten around that we were going to get Humvees, brand new ones. So when we got them, we got to break them in over there at 29 Palms. And one thing that really stuck out when I was there at 29 Palms, we were doing the final live fire exercise. Can't remember the range, but it was a live fire exercise and it was an air bombing range. One of the finales was that we were supposed to get in the final assault after the infantry 0311s dismounted, and then we were supposed to come as we were providing suppressive fire once they secured the first objective. We were to displays and link up with them. Well, in that process, I had 2 vehicles by this time, and I was already a sergeant, so obviously I had a second vehicle, second team assigned. What in weapons company that's called a section. So I had one section with me. As we got the call to displace and move up in the vehicle that I was in, I had my driver, myself, I was in the front seat. I had a dragon team with me, and then I had the gunner on the turret. And as we were moving, obviously, uneven terrain. I remember as we were going, I had my Kevlar as we got in, and I remember just throwing on my Kevlar, and not even just the shin strap was just hanging loosely, and I had the radio with me. It was a handheld radio. I'm communicating, trying to keep calm with the forward element that's in front of me. All I heard was the gunner just yell at the top of his lungs, "Stop!" He just yelled, "Stop!" And next thing we know, we're just going airborne, and we just all braced ourselves. I mean, it was too hard to react. We nosedive into a bomb crater. Again, mind you, this was a brand new Humvee. By the grace of God, and I give him all the glory, because my head would have split like a watermelon, I had just thrown my helmet on, my Kevlar, put my hands up to brace myself, and I hit that windshield directly with my Kevlar. And I cracked that windshield. And anybody that's seen a military Humvee vehicle, that windshield, they're pretty thick. And I cracked it. You're thinking, well, any neck injuries? And obviously I can get into that later, but the bottom line, again, through the grace of God, I ended up with a fractured hand, a couple of cuts, and a banged up knee. I quickly tried to assess and what was going on. I remember looking at my driver, and he had 2 pieces of the steering wheel in his hands, had broken off. And he was pinned, because we had our flak. There were no SAPIC plates, but we did have our flaks on, all our gear on. So he had 2 pieces broken off, and he was pinned against. Why? Because we had ammo cans in the back, ammunition cans. And anything from a Mark 19 cans, when you got Mark 19 ammunition, which we did on that one vehicle that I was in, he was pinned with that in his back. The gunner had rolled off, it threw him off, because there was no safety belt or nothing like that. Just the Mark 19, and this was a live fire range. That Mark 19 flew off the Pendleton, and it was flying with a belt of live Mark 19, HEDP rounds. That's high explosive, dual purpose rounds. Okay, so that fell out. And not to get into the ballistics of what that round needs to do for it to go off, but that's what was happening. And he was firing it, by the way, when we were displacing. But with that said, I quickly assessed I couldn't open the door. Somehow I managed to get out through the turret, and then everybody evacuated. And honestly, somebody had spotted us and they thought we had flipped the vehicle. Pretty much one of the things that I first experienced in weapons company. Of course, the next one was when we got recalled after our peacetime deployment, Westpac. We got recalled that we were going and getting ready to deploy, and that's where Desert Shield, Desert Storm came about. So after the exercise there at 29 Palms, we wrapped it up. We were a little bit banged up. You know, I had a cast in my arm, and it's like, okay, basically doing some Christmas leave, or I can't remember exactly the time frame, but it was during the winter, I remember that, or late fall. And rumor was that about Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait and all this other stuff, and now we're going to go. And of course, Marines were all getting all gung-ho, thinking we got to prep, we got to do this. And then next thing we know, I'm on leave and back in Texas, and I get a call that I got 48 hours, and I got to get back. We're getting ready to deploy. They didn't tell us where or when, but we kind of suspected already. So when we get back, I mean, you had Marines that were already getting out, what we call EAS, and they're into service time. They told them, they stopped, they did a stop loss and says, no, go back to supply and get your gear. There was no SIFs like they have now. It's a supply ran by civilians. Each unit had its own supply unit. So you had Marines, some were pretty disgruntled about it because they already had plans, but they had to go back and get their gear reassigned. And we got recalled, and next thing we know, we're being bused to March Air Force Base. And by that time, obviously, we knew where we were going. We were going to go and repel the enemy, which was the Iraqi forces from Kuwait. So my experience, once we arrived in Kuwait, or actually Saudi, and just like any other battle, we were prepping, make sure everything was bore-sighted to the weapons, and we were packed, loaded, inspected, and then while we were doing that, then Desert Shield kicked off, which was the air campaign. I remember seeing in the horizon, it's like the bombers just bombing everything, and it seemed like a light show. And I remember where we were dug in, I could see the ground would just vibrate, and you could hear it, just with the volume of the explosion. It would impact. We could feel it. That concluded, we knew we were next. Okay, now we got to bring in the ground forces. And I think one of the things that anybody that was there, and ironically, I was there with my cousin. We were in the same unit. If you saw any movie where you got two armies facing each other, that's pretty much what we had. It was a standoff. It was us against them. They had their tanks. I'm sure they had their artillery, mortars, pieces, and ground units as well. And it was a standoff. And we could see behind them, there were oil fields that were already burning. When the call came, everything erupted, and we had our attack helicopters come in with their hellfire, and then we had artillery overhead fire, and we were in the front, and we had our Abrams tanks, which basically they were still relatively new. And then pretty much it was just a standoff till we overwhelmed them, and that's when they started basically either surrendering or just running from the front lines. The ones that stayed in place obviously got destroyed or captured. And then once we got into the oil field, think of it like this. It's in the evening, it's raining, but it's raining oil. And you're getting soaked, and we had the, what they call the chocolate chip camis at the time. And that's what we had. It was like nighttime, but you couldn't see. I mean, everything, I couldn't see. And we're mounted, everybody's mounted either in an Amtrak, in an amphibious assault vehicle, or you're in a Humvee, or in a 5-ton, what they had at that time. Our platoon, or our section, the lieutenant only had one NVG for all of us. And he was taking point. The best way we could navigate through that, not knowing, and we had other encounters, where we came to some kind of resistance, but I can tell you the way we kind of stayed connected to each other was make sure the vehicle in front of you, you're tapping it as you're going, because we could not see. except with a lieutenant on point. You were like in the twilight zone. Think of it that way. If you stop, do not get out of the vehicle. Why? Because you got other vehicles around you. You can get run over or crushed. The pucker factor was definitely there. Like I said, next thing we know, we had a couple of missions to go out and had pockets of resistance that we took out. And that was done relatively quickly. And I can tell you hundreds and hundreds of enemy that had surrendered. Basically surrendered. We found equipment laid out. We had to go clear a lot of underground dug-in positions that were basically underground. We found a medical makeshift clinic underground. We found headquarters. I mean, we found all kinds of stuff. And then not to mention the tanks that had gotten blown up by the hellfire, and some that were still kind of intact too, because they had been abandoned. We had to go clear those as well, not knowing if they were booby-trapped or not. It was definitely a nightmare when we had a lot of enemy surrender, because you couldn't trust them, and rightfully so. With that said, we did the push all the way till we secured. I think all in all, the battalion, we were fortunate enough, and we only had a couple of wounded. I know other units adjacent to us, to include the Army, had suffered some KIAs as well. But I know our battalion was fortunate enough that they did not. It was short-lived as far as the meat of the battle. I think it was more like maybe 96 hours or so. But, I can tell you, anybody that's been there, those 96 hours seems like an eternity to you, and there's no time for sleep, for eating, much less taking care of yourself, hygiene-wise. And you're on the go. You're in a survival mode. That's what you do as Marines. You train for those type of conditions, So it's not about the perfect setting environment for that engagement, not far from it. NCOs took me under their wing and kind of molded me to the, section leader that I became. That not only hardened me, but it also made me appreciate a lot of things that we have here in the United States, especially once we came back. But yeah, the meat of the battle was 96. We secured at the airport, at the Kuwaiti airport, started doing, mop-up operations and just mopping the area, sweeping the area, and then clearing and then, of course, destroying anything and everything that looked Iraqi that was considered, as far as weapons, armament, vehicles. They had all sorts. But again, a lot of it just got abandoned, but most of it got destroyed. Some of them, actually, we brought back, and you'll see it at Camp Pendleton on display. Just like from other battles, other wars as well. So we did the same thing. The hard part of it was the waiting period coming back. We had to sit and wait. And I forgot what camp it was, but after going through all that, all we wanted was a good hot meal and take a good shower and get freshened up. And they provided that for us. And then until our turn came back, we came back to the States and we got a big welcome parade. And I think that kind of welcoming that was long overdue for veterans, and I'm talking about the Vietnam veterans, and they felt good. And even to these days, the ones that we encountered, that I ain't met, they felt good because it was part of them that they felt welcome, even though they were deprived of that. So I felt that I was part of that history, and I'm glad I was. We got back to the United States. Of course, there was the ones that were now no longer in stop loss. So there was a lot of moving pieces to kind of just get into that garrison mode, meaning you're no longer on the battlefield. You got to uphold to these standards. Over there you were in survival mode. So a lot of things you put to the side, Talking something as simple as, I didn't shave today. Okay, well, you're in survival mode. Little things like that you just brush aside. So when we got there, it was kind of readjusting. We had black boots at the end. That means you had to spit shine them. And it took some time, but I think to take it to the next level, I was up for reenlistment. So I re-enlisted. I said, I want to give back to the Marine Corps. And what better way that I felt compelled to do was to re-enlist as a drill instructor. And I did. I got drill instructor, again, talking to the career planner. I re-enlisted, I think, for three years. And I wanted MCRD San Diego because that's where I went to boot camp, so I wanted to go back there. For drill instructor duty at MCRD San Diego, I was excited. I said, I'm giving something to the Marine Corps. Considered myself seasoned. I had, done one combat tour. I had done a Westpac while I was there with 1-1. After I left 1-1 Weapons Company, I went in basically another boot camp, but more demanding. You go as a drill instructor, you go through 3 months. It pretty much, everything you do, you're mirroring what recruits are doing. You got drill instructors, so they're a higher caliber because they got to train you to become a drill instructor. We were put in a squad bay, and the building still stands, and we were on the second deck. Those were our living quarters. We got a wall locker, and we had a foot locker, and we had bunk beds, top rack, bottom rack, and we had to maintain them just like recruits. Our uniforms, our wall lockers got inspected in and out for Irish pennants, not just the outside, inside as well. Reveille always came at 04:30 in the morning. You always took your turn. They're going to put you in the leadership position, whether you're running cadence. And for my class, we had 120. And at the time, we were still taking corporals. It was 3 months of boot camp again, with more expectations. And one of the things with the drill movements, and any former drill instructor can tell you, there were 31 drill movements that you had to recite verbatim and demonstrate. Drill instructor would stand maybe 100 feet, 150 feet, and then you were there very professionally standing, and you had one of your fellow DI students, drill instructor students, he would be your demonstrator. So you would begin your movement, explaining your movement, something along the lines, of course I can't recite any of them all, but I can remember vaguely, something that says the movement I'm about to explain will be the movement of right face. Right face is completed in X number of steps or counts. There are two commands, the preparatory command and the command of execution, and something along those lines. But you have to explain flawlessly. Because I can tell you, if you did not master those, you're not going to graduate. You drill, and then you're also projecting. They want you to get louder and louder. Not yelling, projecting from your diaphragm right here. And anybody that's been there, sooner or later, would end up with a frog voice, losing their voice, just because you're projecting your voice. And some of us still to this day can do it. Maybe not like then, but we remember that. That was my experience. And after that, I graduated, earned my campaign cover, which I still have in my man cave. It was a 2-year assignment. And I was assigned to 3rd Battalion Indy Company. So what's the purpose of the drill instructor? When you see it from both ends, meaning from the recruit side and the drill instructor, it kind of gives you a better understanding why MCRD, why boot camp exists, whether you're in the East Coast or West Coast. And the reason is because not only are you making Marines, but you're making a brotherhood, sisterhood that now is going to last with them forever. I don't know how to explain it, but us Marines, we know that it goes with us for life. And that's why to this day, it's embedded in us. When you hear a spirit of the Corps, that's exactly what it means. It is the spirit of the Marine Corps. You can go talk, I can go ask any Marine. If you saw us and we had never met each other, we can be talking at a store, at a bar, at work, and you're gonna think, oh, they know each other from way back. We just met. That's the spirit of the Corps. That's instilled with you in boot camp. So when you do things like the drill that I just mentioned about the 31 drill movements, why so much drill that when you come out, it's not used. It's not so much how straight you can walk, how far and how many, paces and your arm swing, rifle. No, that has its purpose, but the main reason I believe for drill is to instill confidence, and to instill leadership, to instill teamwork with unity. Because if you don't have those elements, and there's other ones, then that spirit of the Corps is not going to be there. But when you all can sync in with that, with something as simple as drill, guess what else you can do? You can fight together with that unity, with that team, with all those little elements that come into play. It all ties in together, with that confidence that I can be there for my brother or sister on my right and my left. And that's what it's all about. But that, to me, that's what it all starts with, the drill movement. And it starts with the responsibility. That's why as soon as they can, the drill instructor gives you that rifle. And you treat that rifle with respect, and you cater everything you do. Even your cover, your way you're stated, because you represent not yourself, you represent the spirit of the Corps, the Marine Corps. One of the things that really stuck out to me when I was a drill instructor, or that I experienced as a drill instructor, I was a drill instructor from 91 to 93. I think one of the things that really stuck out to me while my tour there as a drill instructor was, I think the one thing that I saw, and I got this from another, and to this day I still pass this on, was to see recruits that were struggling because of their weight. Yeah, they made the Armed Forces weight standard, but they did not make the Marine Corps standard. So they would get painted on their skivvy shirts, T-shirts, with a red mark on the top and the bottom and the back. Not to humiliate them, far from it. That's to identify that recruit, especially in the summer, if it goes down, that individual most likely can be a heat casualty. So we had to identify those individuals. Seeing the progress that they made, you know, and I can tell you individual stories, but I think when you see a recruit that was 50, I had one recruit over 80 pounds, lose 80 pounds or 50 pounds from night to day, you just by seeing their faces. And I remember seeing one drill instructor, he would take a picture before in their skivvies and after. Because what happens that last week, they get their box of their civilian attire back. And during their free time, you'll see them try it on, okay? And some of it's literally falling off of them. It doesn't fit. So with that, the drill instructor would take an after picture and say, you know what, that's a good idea. And at the end, show it to them and say, this is you before. And it was funny at the time because I had recruits trying to suck it in. No, let it all hang out. You know, and of course, they'd adhere to your orders. But that to me, if anything, was a motivator, not only for me, but to see, hey, we did this as a team, but to see those recruits, to see, hey, when you see yourself getting weak and want to revert to your old ways, look at this picture and look at this picture. And let that be your motivator, because you're now representing the Marine Corps. I will share one story. I had two brothers. Their last names was Pierda, okay? And they were from Texas. Obviously, translate that to English meant rock. And we know anybody in the Marine Corps that gets picked on, hey, come here, or you're dumb as a rock. These two, they were twin brothers, and they were both, so we labeled them Rock 1 and Rock 2. Sometimes stressful situations, there was always humor that us drill instructors had to kind of just turn away, especially during the gong show, whatever, that they would have. And man, you had some of these recruits that could imitate drill instructors down to you name it, like that was in him the whole time, you know. But and us as drill instructors, we just turned away, and yeah, it was funny. You know, just the highlight for me, my two years there, was seeing that transformation from these recruits, especially those diet recruits, because I know they were struggling, you know, and we wanted them to succeed. And the ones that gave up on themselves, then they gave up on themselves because we gave them the tools to succeed. And I think that's what drill instructors want to do. They want to be successful because it's a reflection on them. If one recruit fails, then it's because of the drill instructor, my opinion. So after I completed my 2 years there, they cut me some orders. First, I was going to go to 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, 1-9, back to Camp Horno. So when I got checked in division, and back then, well, obviously, I'm sure they still do, you know, you throw your alphas on, your alpha uniform on, and I'm checking in to division headquarters, and I can't remember, it might have been sometime at nighttime, but I checked in, DOD said, oh, wait a minute, it says you got too many sergeants over there at 1-9, I'm reassigning you to 2-9. I said, all right, whatever, you know. So I ended up at San Mateo, Camp Pendleton. And what I mean by San Mateo, you got Camp Horno, those are inner camps within Camp Pendleton. So you got small little camps. There's other ones too that I served in. So this one, I'm gonna go to San Mateo, which is in the northern part of Camp Pendleton. So I got to sign up there, which they fall 2-9 under 5th Marines. You know, and each regiment, we had 3 regiments, 1st, 5th, and 7th for 1st Marine Division. East Coast had their 2nd Division. Then there's other ones, 3rd and 4th. But aside from all that, I got assigned to 2-9, and I was assigned to Golf Company, which in this time it was a line company. But because of my MOS, I ended up in Weapons Platoon, Vice Weapons Company. We were getting ready for deployment, you know, and this time we were going to do a flyover, meaning we were going to do a UDP, Unit Deployment Program, which you fly to Okinawa. From there, we were going to do a small, think of it like a mini Westpac. They call it a carrot cruise. But anyway, you board ship and you're basically out at sea, go to different countries for 3 months. But anyway, aside from that, I ended up at 29 Golf Company. Right before deployment, that's when they were reorganizing the organizations of the Marine Corps. And one of them happened to do, they were going to do away with 9th Marines. So from 29, all of a sudden we became 2-4, the Magnificent Bastards. Okay, and there's some history behind it I can share you later, but so 2-4 Golf Company. So while on deployment, all of a sudden I had Staff Sergeant. One thing I'll tell you about that deployment, that unit, I had a Staff Sergeant Parker. We were in Okinawa, we were doing our workups on ship. We were aboard the USS Dubuque, and he comes up to me, and I'm still a sergeant, and I was in weapons platoon. He's the first platoon sergeant. He said, hey, look, I got to go back stateside. I got to go back for some surgery, and I've nominated you to be the platoon sergeant. And I'm thinking, I mean, I'm in weapons platoon. He's in first platoon. He had 3 sergeants already. I figured, and rumor was that he was already going to go back. But when he called me out to the catwalk, I didn't know, far from it, that he was going to tell me this. And I said, well, Staff Sergeant, don't you already have 3 sergeants? Looking at him, he saw me, hey, you want the damn job or not? I'll take it. I mean, of course I wanted it. So I felt I was ready for it. And next thing I know, he said, hey, the lieutenant's already, your lieutenant, my lieutenant, they already know about it. Just go report to his lieutenant. And I said, okay. And I go, and he's welcoming me, hey, welcome aboard. And you're now the first platoon sergeant. And next thing you know, I ended up doing the deployment as a platoon sergeant, as a sergeant. We were back at Camp Pendleton. Experimental battalion was going to be 3-4. So I volunteered. Next thing I know, I get there and I say, yeah, I'm going to be part of this Sea Dragon concept. And I think still in their infantile stages, so it wasn't really all together. Some of the equipment wasn't there and being put in place, and obviously they needed manpower. That's why they asked for volunteers. So I volunteered and I get assigned there. And I remember going into the admin office, talking to the admin chief. I said, look, because that's when you would get assigned to whatever company you were going to go. And I said, hey, whatever you do, it was a Staff Sergeant. I said, don't put me in weapons company. I've already been in weapons. I wanted something different. So I get there, and where do I end up? I end up in weapons company again. I said, it's great. I did my time there. I remember the first sergeant comes up to me, and his name was First Sergeant Russell. And he comes, hey, Sergeant Garcia, you want to go to Ranger School? I said, hell yeah. I mean, well, you know, those are schools that a lot of us that have been in the infantry, either airborne school or Ranger schools. I said, yeah, of course. I said, okay, just keep PTing the way you do. I'll let you know when we get some orders. Okay. So I did that for about 2 weeks. You know, I'm doing day-to-day stuff. And next thing you know, I say, okay, here, Friday, it's a Friday, so you get your orders. You're going to go to 7th Marines because the unit I was with belonged to 7th Marines, which were at 29 Palms. So you got to report over there to the regiment. All right. So the next day I get up, pack up my gear. I got my gear list, loaded up. I show up there, show up to regiment. His name was Gunner Galinas, Timothy Galinas. He said, okay, be here, over here by what was known the Bandini Lake. Basically, it's a sewer treatment. They call it a Bandini Lake. Anyway, they got a PT field there, and we're supposed to be green on green, right? In PT gear. And so we show up at whatever time, 6:30, whatever, and it was hot during that day. Anybody that's been 29 Palms in the summer knows that. And we get out there. I see about 20, 30 guys. And he does his intro and he says, hey, well, I'm glad everybody, gives us a big welcoming thing. I said, but at the end, there's a 3-day event, and at the end, there's only one quota. And I'm like, really? It's like, you guys, all kinds of, you name them, all infantry, some from Force Recon, just all kinds of Marines. So at the end of 3rd day, after going through that grueling 3 days of PT, it narrowed down, and there's maybe like 5 of us left. And me being one of them. He said, I wish I could send all of you, but only one of you can go. And he calls the Marine out. He said, the rest of you all can stay in the barracks, or you can head on back to your units. You got your traveling orders. Okay. I said, all right. Well, it was 3 days of PT. I enjoyed PTing anyway, so go back, and I go back to the barracks, and next thing I know, I'm in the barracks, and get the duty comes, knocks on the hatch, and says, hey, is it Sergeant Garcia? I said, yeah. What's up? So yeah, the regimental gunner wants to see you in the morning. Make sure you're squared away. I said, wow, you know what's up? He says, I have no idea. So what do? Instead of relaxing, having a couple of beers, I said, okay, I'm ironing my canvas. It was too late to get a haircut. So it's like, okay, so I'm squaring away as best as I could, show up. And all of a sudden he comes out. And I report to him. I say, yes, sir. I say, hey, come on in. He says, look, I decided, the colonel and I decided to send you to Ranger School. I said, we've just found the other Marine wasn't really at that mature level. I was like, okay. So I said, let me just let him know that you're here and he's going to want to see you. I said, all right, sir. So we get to the second deck and say, okay, he's ready for you. He's going to seem a little bit strange. Don't think he's pissed off at you, but just go in there and report. All right, sir. Go in there. I do my routine thing. It's like any other well-disciplined Marine does. I report in and he never puts me at ease. So that only happens like during office hours or something, right? So he's looking down. He's not even looking up at me. And he's asking me, oh, so you think you're going to Ranger School? And I'm thinking, man, well, you're the ones that called me out here, you know? I said, so of course I acknowledged him. I said, yes, sir. So we'll see about that. I said, because there is no DORs, drop on request. There is no giving, there's no recycling. Now, mind you, during this time frame, 96, I was already in zone for promotion to staff sergeant. And anybody that knows during that time frame, in that MOS, ranks were slow from sergeant to staff sergeant. I had been a sergeant for almost 7 years. Okay, so I was not getting promoted just because of zones and the cutting scores. But anyway, the colonel says, well, there's none of that. I says, and if you fail, this will reflect on your fitness report, my evaluation report. I said, man, this could be a career killer. I'm done. And it's like, but you're going to make it straight through. And when you do, I'm going to send you to jump school. Man, that's all I needed to hear. I says, oh, Ranger School, and I get to go to jump school afterwards? Dismiss. I dismissed my eyes, sir, dismiss. And I did the about face and walked out. Gunner Galinas came out. Congratulations, hey, we'll be rooting for you. But that was it. That was my welcome, good luck. None of that. That was it. And as I walked out, I made it straight through. And that was another story. Ranger School was definitely a good gut check for me. And then, but of course, my incentive was to jump school. And I succeeded that. That colonel, who later became a general and well known to this day, was General Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis. So that was my first encounter with the general. He's the man responsible for sending me to Ranger School. Okay, so I got 211 after I left 3-4, because I came back to school. I was going to deploy with them, but lo and behold, they were over. I had got promoted, by the way, when I was in jump school. So when I came back, they were over TOs, too many staff sergeants. So they cut me orders, and I ended up at 1-1 again at Camp Horno. And this time I went to Charlie Company. And so I completed the first tour, the first West Pack, and then during the second West Pack, and by this time we're looking at around 98, 90, around there, 97, getting ready for the second deployment. Well, my oldest son joined the Marine Corps. You know, he ended up in a unit, and I was in this other unit, and he was able to come and join my unit. And because of that, we ended up deploying together in the same unit. I hadn't even heard of it. And I don't think a lot of the Marines, at least in that era, had ever experienced that. Sons and daughters in different units, but never in the same unit. I'm talking, by that time, we were with 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines. I was, by that time, commissioned, as an officer, as a chief warrant officer, and he was enlisted. We did a West Pack together. Public media Marine guy that did a story on us in Singapore. And we came out in the military paper. So anyway, we came back from that West Pack, and next thing you know, we're both in Texas, coming from our West Pack, just like all units. We, got some downtime to leave, and it was already rumored because Iraq was acting up. That's when the weapons of mass destruction thing started getting going. We're at home, Christmas leave, both of us, and we get recalled. I get the call, and then I look at him, and it's like, hey, you're going to get a call here shortly from your squad leader pretty soon. Sure enough, he gets a call, and next thing we know, we're going back to Camp Pendleton, and we board the ship, and we get underway all the way to the Middle East through the Straits of Hormuz, and we end up there in this time, and so upon leaving 3-4, I got reassigned to 1st Battalion for 1-1, and then from there, the opportunity presented itself for the Chief Warrant Officer program. So I went ahead and applied, was denied the first time, and then applied again the following year, and I ended up getting selected. By this time, we're looking at 2000, year 2000, and in 2001, I ended up going to Quantico, go through their schooling, the TBS, the basic school. I'm assigned as my MOS for that commissioning was as a Marine gunner, an 0306 infantry weapons officer. Spent 6 months of training in Quantico. Then after that, I got my first assignment to 3-1 back at Camp Pendleton at Camp Horno. And then from there, when I got to 3-1, by this time, my son had enlisted in the Marine Corps. He wanted to be an infantryman, so he was an 0311, and he got assigned to 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. He did his UDP to Okinawa, 6 months. I did my Westpac, 6 months, board ship. When we both came back, he wanted to go ahead and do a back-to-back deployment through his sergeant major and my battalion sergeant major, because we were getting ready to deploy again. He went ahead and joined our unit. We ended up doing another Westpac together. By this time, we're looking at 2001, and obviously rumors are about Iraqi acting up and whatnot. So by the time we get back, I'm still the battalion gunner. He's still there with us. We get recalled. Well, we come back from the Westpac. We both get recalled that we're redeploying, and we kind of suspected where, to Iraq. So sure enough, we both board the ship as a battalion, the whole ship. So after I was done doing my 6 months of training in Quantico, I had some leave, got home. We were living on base housing. I'm getting ready to check in to my new unit as a Marine gunner. I'm turning on the news, and as I turn on the news, I see buildings collapsing. This was September 11th, okay? And when I saw that, that was 9/11 actually happening. I'm watching it live on TV, not knowing what's going on. I'm squaring myself away. It's like, what? We're under attack? I think I was getting ready. I wanted to check in the morning. I was just mesmerized with what was going on, trying to capture as much information. And because I was on base, it helped me check into my unit because pretty much the whole base was shutting down. A few hours passed. I get up. I'm making my way to Camp Horno. When I get there, there's guards already, road guards out, and I'm getting there, and the battalion, I'm checking into 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, and it was just chaotic. I said, I'm the Marine gunner, I'm checking in, and everything was just kind of chaotic, you know, as you can imagine during that time frame. Once all the dust settled, you know, obviously we had to continue doing our operations as we would. That means we still had to do a Westpac based on what the president at the time and his council was going to, what decisions were going to be given, what orders, that was to be determined later. So we deployed, and by this time, I had my son that was also in the Marines, and he was with 2-4 Golf Company. So he deployed, staying on mission. I deployed, we came back. He comes to my battalion. He wants to do a back-to-back, and they cut him orders, and he joins our battalion. We do another Westpac. We come back, and not even, I'd say, a week, we get recalled. We're both in Texas, and we recall. We're given like 48 hours, I can't remember, maybe less, but to get back to our unit. We get back, and we're boarding the USS Bonhomme Richard, and we start getting underway through the Straits of Hormuz to Kuwait. Disembark, and we start prepping. Again, it was tracks to me, it was like a deja vu from Desert Storm. My son and I both got recalled. We're in the same unit, and we both board the USS Bonhomme Richard and making our way up to the Straits of Hormuz into Kuwait. And to me, it was a deja vu from Desert Storm. You know, here's a repeat again. Because I can tell you how many Marines, you could see it, they had the unknown. But the reality was setting in that we were going to go to war. And having the unknown, meaning who's going to make it back, who's not going to make it back. You know, everybody, that was the lingering question without really being needed to be spoken. I said, well, how did you manage, you know, knowing that you were going to go into war with your son? I said, Well, first I put my faith in God like I always have. He's taken me this far, and I give him all the glory. I said, in that spirit, that's the way I felt that we were going to be okay. But I also knew reality is the reality of the inevitable. I kind of turned that thought, that stress, that worry into a positive. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I have my son. How many fathers and mothers wish they could be there with their sons, you know? And I had heard the stories as kids from family members that say, yeah, that their sons during Vietnam wanted to join. But here I have my son with me. I'm blessed to have my son here with me. What better place if he would have been in another unit? Well, I wouldn't have been in the Marines. That gave me counsel on how not to worry about it. I'm here. So we got in country, and I can tell you we did a couple of foot patrols I did with his squads. I was watch officer several times, but you know, as any father can tell you, or caring person for a loved one, you're there for them. You don't allow those things to interrupt anything. So I was there for him. And I know it gave him peace of mind knowing that my dad's here, you know, and it gave me comfort as well, and to the rest of the family. But then I also looked at those other Marines too. I mean, to me, they were family there. And when you're, as a Marine gunner, you almost feel you have that responsibility. You're the duty expert, you know, on how to employ your weapons, what's the best way to employ these men. And you're the advisor to the commander. So you kind of take that under you, that responsibility. And you learn how to live with it, even when the inevitable presents itself. You have to. Well, that was an experience that I got to experience with my son. That was one of my highlights of my career, that I got to deploy with my son, not only during the peacetime deployment, but also to both of us to go into combat. Thank God we both made it back without a scratch, you know. Unfortunate for others that didn't. My experience from the invasion was a deja vu. Here I go through it all again. Going into the unknown, meaning unknown, you don't know when you're coming back, because they didn't give us a deadline. This is not just a regular, we'll be back in 6 months, or we'll be back in a year or 7 months. There was none of that. It's just, you're going, and when you get back, technology wasn't there. So everybody, the technology was there, but it wasn't available to us. So one of the things the Marines were told, start writing letters. If you've never written a letter, start writing letters, because that's the only mail you're gonna get. You know, and you all learn how to write when you're in boot camp. So that's one of the things that Marines had to revert to, because it wasn't available. There was one iridium phone for battalion. They were giving morale calls. This was like, I think, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months afterwards, after the invasion into Iraq. That was it. Again, those values, that spirit of the Corps was definitely there. My experience going in there, even going when we did the invasion where we were tasked with, we were going through Nasiriyah and taking up the southeastern portion of Baghdad and securing that area. But I think just like anything else, there is boredom that sets in, which is one of the elements of war, boredom. But it was there. We did the push, we secured the objectives, and then of course was the withdrawal, where we got replaced by the Army for sustaining operations. And we made it back to the United States, thank God. Got back to Camp Horno, we were welcomed by the family. But that was only the beginning of what came to be known as Operation Iraqi Freedom. And then not far behind with the Afghanistan kicking off. My son, he ended up doing his 4 years. He was a father, you know, had a little baby. He ended up serving his time, which he was put on stop loss because of that, but he ended up exiting the Marine Corps honorably. So after my son exited the Marine Corps, obviously I was still active duty, being a chief warrant officer, and then just I said, I'm gonna stick in for the long haul, which I already knew I was gonna do it. At this point, I was already about maybe 7 or 8 years left for my 30-year mark, give or take. I stuck with 3-1, and then after that, they cut me some orders, and I went to this other unit. But while I was there, we turned around. Now we were gonna go into Iraq, not as a strike force, like we invaded, but now as a sustaining force, just like the Army was doing. Backing up here, I was with 3-1 after my son got out. All of a sudden, we were gonna do not so much Westpac's peacetime deployments were taken off the table. Our unit got committed to do combat operations. So I ended up, after that push, I ended up deploying upon a return in 2003. I did my last deployment pretty much back to back. I came back to the United States in 2009. One, there were two major significant times there that I experienced was the Second Battle of Fallujah. As everybody knows, the urban warfare that we encountered there, enemy resistance that we had, and the Marines that we lost and got wounded were significant. And the second one we had was in Haditha. Fallujah, obviously just getting into country, we got there during that time frame. We got there in early or late spring, and we were at Camp Karma next to the camp called Fallujah, Camp Fallujah. We got there in middle of the night through some CH-46 helicopters. Anyway, we got in there, we got inserted, and then we prepped. And as an infantry weapons gunner officer, as a Marine gunner, you're prepping the men, making sure all the weapons are bore-sighted, lasers, optics, heavy guns, rockets, missiles. I mean, all that needs to be held to a standard. So I started building ranges right outside the camp. So it was constant, but then we have active patrols going out on patrols. No rest for the weary, that's for sure. I mean, you were all constant, nonstop, not to mention the attacks that we would receive periodically, constantly, but indirect attacks. IEDs were going off. Vehicles weren't suited as they are now. There was no underplates, so we were sandbagging our vehicles, or 5 tons or 7 tons, I think we had them by then. Our windows, they weren't ballistic, so we just closed them up, because you didn't want shrapnel coming in. But we did there was a lot of IEDs, a lot of ambushes. One event was, I was out there with India Company, and they were on a patrol, and we were taking a break, and they started receiving fire, and remember being in there. It was a heated moment until we called reinforcements. I think we might have had a couple that got wounded on there, can't remember specifically. I did so many patrols, but that was that one incident. It was at a schoolhouse. The enemy didn't discriminate. They attacked schools, they attacked hospitals, you name it. Mosque, discriminating as far as to prosecute a target of opportunity. That was that one battle that we encountered. During those deployments, and forgive me if I can't remember each and every one of them, but I can tell you 2 individuals that really kind of stuck out. I remember we got the notification at the battalion. Staff Sergeant Slade had basically flipped his Humvee. They flipped, and there was 5 Marines in there. And because this was a subsequent deployment where for the Fallujah battle, that he flipped into a canal. They all drowned. Not through enemy fire, but they were there and they flipped. That was one of the first encounters that I can recall that all 5 Marines did drown. We weren't able to get them out. They couldn't get out. I think that hit the battalion pretty hard. But just like every Marine that we would lose. But thereafter, what we started experiencing other Marines was a prep for the Battle of Fallujah. When we got the call that we were actually going to go, we had our sector, which we had to cross a railroad track. We had the train station. We had the engineers that had to do a breaching, basically cut a path for us to enter or invade into the city. We started encountering enemy resistance, and we had Iraqi forces on our side too, but I can tell you that having KIAs from all companies, just in our battalion, we had adjacent battalions. But as we went and got more embedded, there were other Marines. You would hear it, and you'd go out there and KIA, you say, oh, so call in what they call kill number. It was a sign because you wouldn't disclose their names. But you say, okay, kill number, you give them whatever number it was, and you give them, since it's KIA. You would give the total tally on how many KIAs, WIAs. I can't recall all the names, but there's 2, but from subsequent deployments. But I can tell you that we lost 34 Marines, and over 400 Marines were wounded in action, some twice. And I just visited there during Memorial Day. I went to Camp Horno, and each of their pictures are there. I can tell you that during the Battle of Fallujah, we lost a total of 34 Marines and killed in action, and then over 400 were wounded, some twice. But what I saw out there was courage. I saw that confidence, that teamwork, and I saw that spirit of the Corps. And when you get those numbers coming in daily, and then you see Marines being put in body bags, knowing that that's it, they're not coming back. What what allowed us to go forward? And I don't care what's on your collar, what rank you were. It impacted all of us. Any indifferences you had, as we all do in real life, but you put all that aside. And that really showed us a real value. But when I saw those Marines being put in body bags, I saw booby trapping their own bodies, the ones that had fallen, that you'd have another new booby trap and grenades going off, and now you have a mangled, wounded Marine. I was on a patrol once, and I was going, and they were doing laying mortars, direct lay. When you're in urban warfare, you do direct laying. Means you use sight and range. That's it. Your direction and distance. Everything there was danger close. You can get hit by your own friendly fire. There was a Marine, and they were receiving fire from one house, so I had two Marines with me, one in front with a saw, and then I had a Marine, and we were going to try to outmaneuver them when we see grenade land right in front of them. And I remember just pulling them back and yelling grenade, and we pulled back and fell. Next thing I'm hearing the Marine in front of me, I'm hit. Had another element outmaneuver us and go and take out the threat, but that Marine got hit. But just that split of the action, you have to make the decision. And that's where that training kicked in. Human reaction kicks in. Same Marine continued to fight on another day. Some didn't. That was during that time, that unit, when we had First Sergeant Castle, guy that we knew. And I remember I was going up to Kilo Company this time around. They were housed up in a 2-3-story house, and I ran into them. And I remember running into them because I would take turns with each company for 2 or 3 days. And I said, "Hey, First Sergeant, what are you doing here?" So I'm just checking on my boys. He was a weapons company First Sergeant. So you want to go on a patrol? I said, "I'll get you on the next one," because I had my checklist that I normally would as a Marine gunner. So I'll get you. But it was so routine that you knew I would at least do 1 day patrol, 1 night patrol, and I observed the COC operations. Then I'd give my report. Well, that's that First Sergeant. So I went out on that mission. That's when he got hit. And I think 2 Marines instantly got killed and others wounded. First Sergeant Castle got hit, but again, it was those Marines that we've all seen the picture that he gets evacuated, blood written, on his uniform. But just like anything else, and I went to the top side, to the rooftop. If you know anything about the structures of Iraqi houses, everything's concrete. You go to the top, and you basically got a patio up on top on the rooftop. Well, you had a sniper team attached to us that was sniping, prosecuting targets. It was a Navy SEAL team. And it was, so I went topside, and as we well know, Chris Kyle was prosecuting target, and he had his spotter right there. But then again, that was just my checklist. Okay, we got sectors of fires covered and doing all that, what all Marine gunners do. And went back, and I did my patrol where I pulled that Marine, from getting further injured or dying from that grenade that was thrown over the wall. But that was one of many, and there were other incidents that went on. The Marines find humor in everything, and I remember one time we were doing a patrol. And I think it was with the same company. Well, there was 2 incidents. I'll share with another one real quick. There was an incident, and he was lobbing. He had his 203. Well, if you know anything about the round, the projectile that fires out of that weapon, there's 2 types. Okay, well, there's other types, but 2 lethal types. There's the HE, high explosive, and there's the HE, DP. Okay? The difference between those 2 is that one takes longer to arm and light the fuse so it can detonate. Okay, so you got the HE round. The HE DP only takes 7 meters, give or take, if I remember right. Or maybe less, 3 meters. I can't remember. It's been a long time. But the HE round takes longer. So I got this Marine who's firing HE, which takes longer to arm. He's firing, and he's hitting this house, like the front door. And he's only maybe about 10 feet away. It's not blowing up, sir. So what's going on? And I looked at his weapons and said, "Oh, those are HE." He says, you either got to back up or you got to get HEDP. He said, oh, so he takes out his HEDP. As soon as he lobs that, it blows up. I found humor in that, and it's like throwing something at the wall. It's not going to blow. You can discharge everything. You're basically giving the enemy something he can use on an IED now. It's not fully armed, basically. Another time I was with Lima Company. We were clearing this one house, and everything before you go clear a house, you throw a satchel charge. Okay? So you had Marines in there, and you get the 51s that go in there, they prep it, put the fuse on it, and run it. It's like, okay, it's going to go off 10, 9, whatever county. It doesn't go off. Like, what the hell? Throw another one. Same thing. They did that about 3 times. And what it was, the enemy was coming down, cutting the fuse before it detonated. Okay? I said, you know what? I remember you got to cut that in half and run like hell. And sure enough, as soon as they did, they cut that. I mean, they had like seconds, like 5 seconds. Man, they do it. They threw it and they hold it. I mean, they just dove and that thing blew up. But that was, that's the kind of humor we had with each other, But when we would get back to our firm base, we had a security platoon. I remember one song that really stuck to me. There were so many songs that kind of flood you with memories, but it was from, believe it or not, because it was when you saw the memorials that we held for all these Marines, anger had built up on you, the rage that you just wanted to get back. They had one song, and I remember to this day I still listen to it. Yeah, I'm sure you maybe have heard of it, but it's James Brown, Payback. I don't know if you ever heard, but listen to it. And that's what kept them going. It's payback, basically payback time. But you had to find something to kind of, that battle, I think, out of all of them was really one that really impacted me a lot. After that, we did the Haditha, the battle into Haditha, not as intense as this one, but it was battle nonetheless. There were Marines lost. There was other units out there when we did the relieving of the Army, when we took over the prison where prisoners were being mistreated. We relieved that unit and we took over that. I know there was a sniper team that got ambushed there and they all got KIA'd, execution style. And they stole all their equipment. That was things that we saw often. Ramadi, you had the sniper out there. Yeah, I went a couple of times. I was never assigned there. In subsequent tours, I went and did other tours. I went to Korean Village. I went to, like I said, the Fallujah battle, the Haditha, with LAR, Light Armored Reconnaissance. I did 2 deployments with them. I wrapped it up, came back. They offered me, monitor said, hey, where do you want to go? Losing a Marine in battle and knowing that they don't have their immediate, meaning biological family or loved ones around them. We are his family. And it affects all of us because we could be talking to them that morning and they're gone that afternoon or that night or whatever the case may be. And it did. It happened. The next day, you just continue like, I'm not going to say nothing's there, but it's there. But when you go pay your respects and when you see that cross with those combat boots and those cross rifles, and you hear whatever music that Marine enjoyed listening to, and you see the Marines just gathering around and paying their respects, something that you want to share with the family, with his family, saying we were here for him and we did the best we could. We never planned for this, but we wanted to be there for him like he was for us. Through his sacrifice, I'm going to get to go home, or most of us will. But we want it to be meaningful, saying, we're respecting him here. We're not just forgetting him and shipping his body back. Far from it. He'll be in our hearts for the rest of our lives. And we'll share those stories. And I can tell you other stories as well that went on, that another tour that I lost, that a good Marine that used to come to me as a Marine gunner, and he was a sergeant, Sergeant Calderon, and he would come tell me stories, and he felt comfortable, because I was like a father figure to him. Next thing I know, they were doing a mission. He's in a trunk, trying to probe, infiltrate, and they take him out. They blow up the vehicle, and he dies in it, and he's gone that quick. There were other Marines, too, that lost. One that was going to get out, be an LA cop. He had his kid. He was showing me pictures. Next thing you know, that was when I was in Haditha. Get the word, KIA. Last vehicle coming through the checkpoint. Detonates. That's why when they say complacency, do not allow complacency to say, oh, you can't, because you just never know. We always try to keep the enemy on their toes. Why it's the other way around. Can go on with how many other Marines have experienced, but when you come back here, but those are the experiences the memorial had for me that you're trying to justify that I'm here for you. I'll always be here for you, for your family. You want to convey that message to the family that he was not alone. Or in some cases, she was not alone. And I can still see those crosses. And every time I see the memorials out here, like the one they have every year, that when they go up to Microwave up there at Camp Horno, I see it. I see a lot of veterans going up there paying their respects. It's that memory is ongoing from one to the other. You never forget. So that's what those memorials meant to me there. That's the best thing we could give the family. So after my last deployment in country in Iraq, meaning in 2009, I came back. The monitor said, hey, I know you got a couple of more years. When you think about it, 2 years way back when you start seems like a long time ago. But that moment was coming. So I told the monitor, where are they? Well, we got 4th Line Armored Reconnaissance, which at the time was right across the street because I was with 1st LAR. And the other unit was 4th Reconnaissance Battalion in San Antonio, Texas, which originally, that's where I'm from, Texas. And I said, you know what? And I remember hearing old timers say, the Twilight Tour, I'm gonna do this or that. And, after doing all these tours back to back from 2003 to 2009, something inside of you just wants to keep going because of those fallen Marines, something wants to pull you in. You feel like if you leave, you're leaving them behind, and it kind of just, you get drawn into that. And that's the way I felt. And why do I say that? Because 4th LAR was getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan. I had just gotten back and they were going to deploy like 4 or 5 months later. It was a hard decision for me to make because I said, you know what? I got 2 years left. I've done this back to back, and looking back at my whole career with 13 deployments and the in-between stuff of TADs, out in the field, going through one marriage, and dissolving, seeing my kids growing up, missing a lot of their childhood because I was always gone. I said, you know what? I got to do this decision that sooner or later it's going to be there staring me in the face anyway. And I ended up going to 4th Reconnaissance Battalion in San Antonio, Texas. Not that they were not deployed, but they did deploy at one point as a whole battalion. But I knew that at this juncture, the way deployment cycles and what I saw, they weren't going to deploy anytime soon as a battalion. So I said, send me to 4th Reconnaissance Battalion. That's what I chose. And I wrapped up my 2 years down there, and I'm glad I did because I was able to devote time to the family. I still got a little taste of the Marine Corps. I met great Marines there. Kind of gave me an appreciation for the Reserve Marines. Because when you're active duty, you're doing that 24/7. As a reservist, my hat's off to those reservists because they're weekend warriors, but you know what? They got a lot of catching up to do on that one weekend, on that drill weekend. And still, when I saw them out there in the battlefield with me, now I can understand what they go through. They got 2 lives going on, Marine Corps and their personal lives, whatever, work, school, family. So, that gave me a better appreciation and kind of gave me a well-rounded understanding of the Marine Corps from having served with 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th commands, divisions. But that's pretty much where I wrapped it up. And at the end of the day, it's a hard pill to swallow when it's a sweet and sour, so to speak. It's your time. You're now considered the old man, and you got to move on and give room to others. After I completed my last assignment there at Fort Sam Houston, which ironically was the same base my father was stationed there as a military policeman, he was pretty shocked at the time when I got stationed there because he never fathomed the thought as a 20-year-old he would see his son retiring out of there. But with that said, the transition when I exited and I retired from the Marine Corps, it didn't hit me. I mean, I was glad. I said, okay, I got to move on. I'm ready. It was a challenge, not hard, but a challenge to kind of readapt into society. But I think what helped me, because I said, well, I don't plan on working. I really don't. I said, I think financially I'm pretty well established. So I think I'll use my GI Bill since I never used it, never went to school, meaning college. I said, well, I'll put it to use and That's another sort of money, the post 9/11 GI Bill, that's bringing me some income. So I said, I'll just do that and I'll decide from there. And I did that. And quite frankly, I didn't work for 6 years. It wasn't available, but because by choice, I elected not to work. I dedicated myself going to school. However, that kind of kept me away from society, from the civilian side. But deep down inside, I was missing the Marine Corps every day, and even today. But after those 6 years, school kept me busy for a while, for about 3.5 years. The opportunity presented itself to come to work for the federal government, and I jumped at it. And it was a direct hiring opportunity, and I got it. And I've been there for going on 7 years. And I can tell you, at first, it was challenging. Well, the first thing I noticed, because remember, the military is a young person's world. So when you retire at 49, you're considered like an old man, and you can figure generals and sergeant majors that go up to 40 years. So when you get out at 49, you're really not that old when you come work out here. Actually, still kind of relatively in your prime. And that's what I found out real quick, because there was other people well in their 60s and some 70s and older. So I said, oh man, I'm like considered the young pup here. The challenging thing was how to connect with civilians. Now, being in my line of work, especially doing infantry, there were no women at the time, except in one of the assignments, or maybe two, we had line assist programs. So because of the culture of Iraqis, we had to bring women for searching and people's bodies, meaning women and kids, because it was very offensive to their culture. And as we know anything about that part of the world, there's a thing called honor killings. To avoid all that, but there was no real like co-worker, unlike where I'm at today. So that was a challenge because my communication skills and with the opposite sex had to get tailored, because I was just military jargon around Marines, and my emailing, I had to clean it up, and I'm not talking using vulgar language, but I had to be more tactful, so to speak. I had to adapt to a civilian way of thinking, speaking, conveying information, and receiving it, and understanding that when a person's doing this and their schedules, in the Marine Corps, you're on mission till it gets done. You're not set, so to speak, on a timeline. So that was a challenging thing, getting used to their schedules, the breaks, the lunch, the opposite sex, my communication methods, had to be more tactful. Not disrespectful, but more tactful. The respect was always there, but it could be interpreted as otherwise. So that was challenging to me. But one thing it did help, especially where I work at, there's a lot of veterans, a lot. So that kind of gave me a pool of team members that I can say, hey, it's just like the military. I can still, whether you in the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, Coast Guard, it doesn't matter. We're all together. If they went through, they were in, he retired, they did 6 years, 10 years. They had to adapt sooner or later, and here we are. And then reality kind of sets in after a while. But as stubborn as I was still having that itch. So I volunteered for the California State Guard, which is an all-volunteer force. I did that for 2 years. I said, no, you know what? I got to call it quits. But that's another force that the state of California, under the state governor, has. But different missions. But yeah, and today I feel, because of my endurance, those triggers that propelled me forward. I'm happily married. We raised 6 kids, 2 that were in the Marines, 1 that that grandson that's just finished his time in the Marines, and then I got a granddaughter that's in the Marines, and I got 1 that just went to the Air Force. So it kind of tells me there was an impactful setting, I guess you could say, for how it radiated down to the family. They've always been very supportive, and man, being here in the USA, it's a good country to be in. I can tell you, being in third world countries, you see a lot of things that you appreciate, that it's good to be a U.S. citizen. The one thing today that really sticks out to me is with veterans, some of the experiences that I experienced, maybe some even worse, I'm sure, is how to cope with life. how not to shortchange yourself, deprive yourself on how you should continue going forward. You don't stand alone. Not only do you have a family of veterans, and I mean veterans, family of veterans from all branches, okay? But you got that brotherhood, sisterhood that you can bond with, but you also got your family that have been there for you. You know, and I tell a lot of veterans, you know, and I can tell you that from personal experience. After retirement, I volunteered for the Veteran Service Officer. I did that for 2.5 years, helping veterans with their claims or just talking to them. Get them through life. Not shorten it, but get through life. Don't deprive yourself or your family opportunities. And for fellow men and women that lost their lives, yes, so you could have yours. Don't shortchange them and their families. Don't let it go in vain. As if anything, be productive in society. Be somebody, you know, and stand up. I'm not saying I'm the ideal example, far from it, but I think because of that thought process, I can represent. I can say I am here for them. Or for the ones that I saw that came, I saw Marines coming with no legs or lost an arm and limbs. You know, I saw them getting wounded in battle, ones that didn't make it back. When I think and I get these depressions, I kind of just try to turn my negative into positive. As a matter, I don't try, I do. I've pushed myself. Just like I pushed myself outside that wire, knowing anything can and will happen. But what propels me to go outside the wire? Why? Because I'm looking out, I gotta do this together. And I would tell you, if you're feeling depressed, if you feel you wanna end it, if you feel you can't go on no more, stop. Call somebody. Somebody is always there for you. I don't care what time or place. I've gotten the calls, and I'm sure many out there have. But you're not alone. Just like those Marines that I saw in body bags, that's it. It's game over. And you know what? The ones you leave behind, they're still going to have to carry that torch. You got to be there with them. Yeah. Well, you know, I just want to thank for this opportunity to at least speak, and you can hear my story, and I can go on and on. So you can imagine 30 years. But I can say I stand here today because of God. I give Jesus Christ all the glory, and I always will. And it wasn't always the case that way. My thought process, my spirit didn't feel that way. But I'm thankful that I'm here after 13 deployments, 6 that were combat tours as an infantry guy, that I walked away without a scratch. God bless you all. Thank you.